It was supposed to be the perfect road trip. A getaway for me and my friends to clear our heads and have a few days away from the grind. My name's Jake, and I'm the one telling you this. Believe me, if you think this is a tale to scare kids, you're wrong. This is real. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest. I've tried forgetting it, but the more I push it down, the more it comes back. We left on a Thursday night, just after midnight. Me, Adam, and Olivia. Nothing special about us. Just a few friends, typical American crew. Well, except for the fact that we didn't know we were driving straight into hell. It all started with a simple text from Adam. Let's hit the road. Need a change of pace. Sure, it was a long drive, around 400 miles to some quiet town in Utah we found on a map. One of those places you pass by on the highway but never really stop to think about. We rented a cabin, said it'd be quiet. The perfect escape. As we cruised down the highway, the hum of the tires on the asphalt was comforting at first. It was just one of those nights where the sky was clear, the moon was bright, and everything felt normal. Olivia was in the back, headphones in, probably listening to some new podcast. Adam was at the wheel, already starting to crack jokes, trying to keep things light. But as the hours wore on, something started to feel off, like the air was thicker. I didn't say anything at first. You don't want to be the paranoid one, right? But there was a point, around 2 a.m., when I noticed something strange. Every now and then, when I glanced out of the window, I swore I saw something moving on the side of the road. Something quick. At first, I thought it was just the trees swaying or an animal. But no, felt like something was following us. Did you see that? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Adam didn't look up from the road. See what? Never mind, I muttered, rubbing my eyes, but I couldn't shake the feeling. It's like someone was out there, watching, waiting. We didn't stop until the sun came up, and when it did, everything seemed normal again. We were near the town now, maybe 50 miles outside. But as we approached the outskirts of the town, the radio static started. We tried changing the station, but it wouldn't stop. It was like the signal was being jammed. Then, a voice came through. It wasn't a DJ. It was deep, gravelly, and cold. Get off the road. That was all it said before the static took over again. We all just stared at each other. None of us had touched the radio. Adam turned it off, but the words hung in the air. By the time we rolled into the town, it was noon, but the place looked dead. The streets were empty, no one in sight, just a few rundown buildings. It was like time had forgotten this place. We found the cabin easily enough. It was old, looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. But it was perfect, just a little secluded, a place to crash for a couple of days. The keys were waiting for us under the mat. We were the only ones there. That night, we decided to go for a walk after dinner. The air was cool, and the town had this eerie, almost suffocating silence. As we walked down the main street, I noticed something strange again. Windows, all of them, some of them were cracked, others just dark. But in the reflection of one, I saw someone standing. Just standing there, staring back at me. A man. I quickly turned around, but no one was there. I thought I was losing it. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone. Olivia laughed when I told her what happened. Adam just shrugged it off. But something inside me told me we shouldn't stay here. I didn't say anything, though. Not yet. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside the cabin. Slow, deliberate. Then, a knock at the door. I waited. Another knock. I grabbed my phone. No signal. The third knock came louder this time. Someone was waiting for us. I crept toward the door, peeking through the blinds. There was nothing out there. The footsteps had stopped. But something was very wrong. I felt it. This was only the beginning. The night stretched on, thick with tension. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring out the window, heart pounding in my chest. But everything remained still outside. Whatever or whoever was out there was gone. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like something had been waiting for me to make a move. I don't know why I decided to stay in that cabin. Maybe I thought I was overreacting, or maybe I was too tired to think straight. Either way, I eventually fell back asleep, but I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man, the one I'd seen in the reflection earlier. His face was twisted, blurred, but the eyes, those eyes, cold, empty, like he wasn't alive. And each time I woke up, I'd hear the same sound, footsteps, scraping against the porch. Morning came and I didn't feel any better. The others, though, were already up, laughing, cooking breakfast. They didn't seem to notice how quiet everything was outside. The way the air felt too thick, like it was holding something in. "Jake, you okay?" Adam asked, flipping pancakes. "You look like you saw a ghost last night." I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The sun was shining, but the whole place had this unnatural calm to it. I needed to get out, get some air. So we decided to drive around the town, maybe see what else was here. As we cruised down the empty streets, I noticed more odd things. Cars parked on the sides of the road, but no people anywhere. It was like a ghost town. We passed a small diner, but it was completely empty inside. The windows fogged up. A few houses, too, with lights on, but no one in sight. "That's strange," Olivia said, pointing to a house with a perfectly manicured lawn. "It looks like they're all still home, but no one's outside." Couldn't argue. It was like the town was frozen in time. Everyone inside, just waiting. We made our way to the outskirts of town, toward a trail that led into the woods. I thought maybe I could get my mind off things, walk around, shake the unease. Adam and Olivia weren't as freaked out as I was, though, and I envied that. They didn't hear the same things I heard at night. That was when we saw him. He was standing by the trailhead, just outside the woods, watching us. The man, the one from my dreams. I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat. Olivia didn't seem to notice at first, until Adam tapped my shoulder and said, "Who's that?" The man didn't move. He stood still, as if he had been waiting for us. His clothes were ragged, his hair unkempt, but there was something about him that made my skin crawl. "Let's go," I muttered, turning around. "Now." Adam raised an eyebrow. "Jake, what the hell?" "He's just standing there. Relax." But I couldn't relax. The feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I didn't even care if I sounded paranoid. There was something off about him, like he wasn't supposed to be there. We turned back toward the car, but as we did, I heard it again. The footsteps, not from the man, but from somewhere deeper in the woods. Slow, deliberate. Someone or something was coming toward us. Olivia looked at me, then at Adam. "I think we should go." We were almost to the car when we heard it. A loud snap, like a twig breaking in half. I spun around, but there was no one there. The man was gone. The footsteps stopped. I don't know why I felt such a heavy dread, but I did. I could barely breathe. We got in the car and started driving, my heart still racing. I didn't say anything. None of us did. As we drove back toward the cabin, I noticed something even more unsettling. The town was gone. It was like we were driving through an endless stretch of woods. No houses, no roads, just trees. "We're lost," I said, panic creeping into my voice. "This isn't the way back." Adam slammed on the brakes. "What do you mean, we're lost? We passed that diner 10 minutes ago." I looked out the window. The diner wasn't there anymore. It was gone along with everything else. Just endless woods. "Turn around," I demanded. Adam did, but no matter which direction we went, we just couldn't get out. It was like we were trapped in some kind of loop. And that's when we heard it. The voice again. The one from the radio. "Get off the road." It echoed from the trees, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That's when the car stopped. The engine just died. And that was when the real terror began. The car was completely still. The engine, once humming steadily, had just gone silent. No sputter, no warning. Just dead. I looked around at Adam, who was staring at the dashboard, hitting the ignition like it was going to magically start again. But there was nothing. "Shit," Adam muttered, his knuckles white from gripping the wheel. "This can't be happening." I didn't have to say anything. We all knew it wasn't just the car. Something else was wrong. The air was thick, suffocating. The woods felt alive, like they were pressing in on us. The sunlight outside had started to fade, even though it was only late afternoon. Shadows stretched unnaturally long. "We should walk," Olivia said. She sounded oddly calm, like this was something that happened all the time. I couldn't agree with her. Not in a million years. Something was out there. I could feel it. My chest tightened, and my palms started to sweat. "We'll be fine," Adam said. "I'm sure there's a mechanic in town, or we'll find a gas station or something." But when I looked out the window, I saw that the road, what was left of it, wasn't a road anymore. It was a dirt path, like we had just left civilization behind entirely. "Olivia, get your phone?" I said, trying to stay calm. "See if you have signal." She fumbled for a moment in her bag, pulling out her phone. Her face paled when she looked at the screen. "No signal," she whispered. "I don't have any bars." "Great," I said, feeling the panic rise in my throat. "We're stuck in the middle of nowhere, and there's no way to contact anyone." Suddenly, we all heard it. A voice. It wasn't the same voice from the radio this time. It was close. Too close. It was a whisper. "Get out." I froze. It was a whisper, but I heard it as clearly as if it had been shouted. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I turned to Adam and Olivia, but they didn't seem to hear it. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. Olivia looked at me like I was crazy. "Hear what, Jake?" I didn't know how to explain it. Couldn't. I had to get out of that car. I had to do something, anything. Before I could say another word, I heard the footsteps again. Those slow, deliberate steps that had haunted me from the very beginning. They were closer now, right outside the car. My heart was racing. "Adam," I whispered, "someone's out there. We need to go." Adam didn't even look at me. He just stared straight ahead, a look of confusion on his face. Then it hit me. He couldn't hear it. Whatever this thing was, it was targeting me. I don't know why, but it was. The others weren't reacting the same way I was. Before I could speak, the car door opened. Couldn't breathe. It was like the air in the car had been sucked out, leaving nothing but suffocating silence. My eyes locked onto the figure standing outside the door. It was him, the man from the woods. His face was pale, his eyes empty. He stood there, staring into the car, his hands resting on the door frame. He didn't move. He just watched me. "Jake," Olivia said, her voice quivering. "What's happening? What do you see?" I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry. My entire body was frozen in place, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. He finally spoke. His voice was low, cold, and it rattled my bones. "You should have never come here." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Without warning, he stepped back, disappearing into the trees, and I heard the unmistakable sound of something heavy dragging through the underbrush. That's when the true horror hit me. He wasn't alone. I grabbed the door handle, my heart racing as I pulled it open. "Get out. We need to move now." But as I looked down the dirt path, I saw figures emerging from the trees. More of them. They were too far away to make out their faces, but I didn't need to see them clearly. I could feel them. They were coming toward us. "Adam! Olivia!" I screamed. I don't know why, but Adam seemed frozen. He didn't even flinch. Olivia was looking around frantically, her eyes wide with panic. I didn't wait any longer. I yanked Olivia's arm, pulling her toward the woods. "Move!" I shouted. "Now!" We ran. It felt like the ground was shaking beneath my feet, like the whole forest was alive, watching us. I could hear footsteps behind us, slow at first, then faster, heavier. "Jake, we can't outrun them!" Olivia screamed. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. I could only run faster. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. We rounded a bend in the path, and that's when I saw it, a clearing. A small cabin, standing alone in the middle of the forest. Its windows were dark, like it hadn't been used in years. I grabbed Olivia's hand, pulling her toward it. "Jake, wait!" Olivia shouted, but I couldn't stop. We had no choice. We reached the door. It was locked, I slammed my shoulder into it, and it burst open with a creak. Inside, it was pitch black. Cold air hit us immediately, sending a chill through my bones. But I didn't care. I had to get inside, lock the door, and I turned to see Olivia, her face pale with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. There was something behind her. The moment I turned to look at Olivia, I knew it was too late. The thing standing behind her wasn't human. It wasn't even close. It was tall, impossibly tall, with skin that shimmered like it was made of something unnatural. It had no face, just a smooth, featureless surface where a head should have been, and its arms were long, too long. It stood perfectly still, like it was studying us, waiting for something. I felt my stomach drop to my feet, my body frozen in place. Olivia was barely breathing, her eyes wide with terror, her body shaking. "Olivia," I whispered, but my voice was barely audible. She didn't respond. She was too scared to move. I had to do something. I didn't know what. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even prepared for this. I had no idea what this thing was or why it was here. All I knew was that we had to survive. I grabbed her wrist, pulling her inside the cabin with everything I had. We slammed the door behind us. My heart was hammering so loud in my chest, I couldn't hear anything else. We ran to the farthest corner of the cabin, finding shelter in a small, dark room. There were no lights, no power, just dust and cobwebs. It looked like no one had been here for decades. But I didn't care about the cabin anymore. I cared about staying alive. As we huddled together in the corner, I could hear the heavy footsteps of that thing outside. Slow, deliberate, like it was savoring the hunt. Olivia was crying now, her voice shaking as she whispered, "Jake, what is that thing? What the hell is happening?" I didn't have an answer. I had no explanation. But I did know one thing. We weren't alone in that cabin. There was something else here. I could feel it. Something was moving, shifting in the dark. I strained my ears, trying to catch the faintest sound. And then I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't the thing outside. No, this voice was different. It was familiar. "Jake." My blood ran cold. I knew that voice. It was Adam. I turned to Olivia, my breath catching. "Did you hear that?" She nodded frantically. "It's him. It's Adam. He's out there." I didn't know what to believe anymore. How could Adam be out there when we left him at the car? Had he followed us? No, that didn't make sense. But the voice was unmistakable. "Jake, help me." The whisper came again, just outside the door. I felt my legs turn to jelly. I wanted to call out to Adam, but something in my gut told me not to. Something was off. I was starting to understand. This place, these woods, they weren't normal. There was a dark force here, something ancient, something that used voices, faces, memories to lure you in. And the worst part was realizing that Adam might already be something else. "Olivia, we can't trust that voice," I said, barely above a whisper. "We have to stay quiet. We don't know what's out there." She looked at me with pleading eyes, but I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look anywhere. I could feel them all around us. The woods were closing in, and the walls of the cabin seemed to breathe with us. There was a sudden loud crash outside. I spun toward the window, heart racing. The thing was there, moving closer, its body looming like a shadow. The ground shook again, the heavy footsteps drawing nearer. It stopped just outside the door. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Then the whisper came again, this time much closer. "Jake, I'm right here. Open the door." I don't know why I did it, but I crept toward the door. My hand was trembling as I reached for the handle. Olivia grabbed my arm, pulling me back, but I shrugged her off. "No," I said. "I have to know if it's him. I have to see what's out there." I opened the door a crack. The moment I did, I felt a wave of cold air rush inside. The trees outside were darker, moving unnaturally, twisting like they were alive. And then I saw it. Adam, or what was left of him. He was standing there, but not like a human. His face was wrong. His skin was stretched, his eyes black and empty. He was grinning, but it was a grin that made my blood freeze in my veins. "Jake, let me in, please." His voice was the same, but it was warped. Wrong. The thing outside stirred, sensing the opening, its presence creeping into the room. I slammed the door shut, barely missing Adam's outstretched hand. The cabin's walls felt like they were closing in on us, as if it wanted to trap us, suffocate us. "We're running out of time," I said, my voice breaking. "We need to find a way out of here, now." But just as I turned, I noticed something even worse. There was another figure, standing in the far corner of the room, just out of reach of the flickering shadows. A woman. She was tall, pale, with eyes that were too wide for her face. She was staring directly at me, and her lips didn't move, but I heard her voice, clear as day. "You should have never come here." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. Couldn't move, couldn't think. This was no longer just a forest. This was a trap, a place that devoured people, chewed them up, and turned them into something else. And I was next. The woman standing in the corner of the cabin didn't move, didn't even blink. Her eyes were locked onto mine, wide and unblinking. It was like she was studying me, but in a way that made every instinct in my body scream at me to run. Olivia must have seen the same thing. She gasped and backed away, pressing herself against the wall. "Jake, what is that? What is she?" I couldn't answer. I could barely breathe. The air around us was so thick, it felt like it was pressing in from all sides. The shadows seemed to shift in the corners of the room, like they had a life of their own. The cabin felt alive, and not in a good way. It was suffocating. The woman didn't speak. She just stood there, her eyes still fixed on me. But then, she tilted her head slightly, almost as if she were waiting for something. That's when I heard it. The voice, that same whisper I had been hearing ever since we arrived. "Get out!" It hissed, barely audible. The woman's lips curled into a slow, eerie smile, and I realized something chilling. She wasn't alone. I turned quickly to look behind me, heart pounding in my chest. There, standing just beyond the door, was the man from the woods, the one I had seen earlier. He was grinning, his teeth sharp, glinting in the dim light. The same unearthly, unnatural grin that seemed to stretch farther than any human smile should. "Jake," the man said, his voice deep and hollow. "We told you not to come." I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like I was stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Olivia was still pressing herself against the wall, her eyes darting between me and the creatures. "Jake, what is happening? Who are these people? Why do they look like that?" I couldn't answer her. The words wouldn't come. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, but nothing fit. The woman, the man, the whispers, the shadows. None of it made sense. All I knew was that we were surrounded by something ancient, something that had been waiting for us. We had walked into a trap, and there was no way out. The man stepped forward, his movements unnaturally smooth, like he was floating instead of walking. "You've entered our domain," he said in that hollow voice. "Now you will stay." I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. It was like my legs were made of lead, my feet glued to the floor. Olivia was just as paralyzed as I was, staring at the figures in front of us, unable to tear her eyes away from the horror. The woman spoke next, her voice a cold, rasping whisper that sent a chill through my spine. "This place is ours. We control it. And you are not leaving." I finally managed to tear my gaze away from them, looking around the cabin. The walls seemed to warp, the shadows twisting and curling like they were alive. The windows were no longer clear, just dark, like the outside world had been swallowed by the forest. The door we had come through wasn't even visible anymore, just a black void where it should have been. It was as if the cabin itself was part of the trap, part of the thing that was holding us here. Olivia, still shaking, whispered, "What do they want from us?" I didn't have an answer, but as the figures in front of us moved closer, a terrible realization settled into my bones. They weren't just watching us. They were feeding off of our fear. I turned to Olivia, trying to find something, anything that could help us. But my mind was blank, the panic consuming me. That's what they want, I muttered under my breath. They feed off our fear, and the more we're afraid, the stronger they get. As if on cue, the woman and the man stepped forward in unison. The air grew colder, and I could feel the energy in the room crackling with something dark. It felt like they were drawing closer, pulling us in with each step, like they were manipulating the very space around us. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. We have to stop being afraid. We have to fight back. Olivia looked at me wide-eyed. Fight back? Jake, how do you fight this? How do you fight them? I didn't know. I didn't have an answer, but something inside me told me that if we didn't act soon, we'd be lost forever. And that's when I remembered something, the radio. The voice from the radio that had told us to get off the road had been a warning. A warning to turn around, to leave before it was too late. But we hadn't listened. Now we were paying the price. But maybe, just maybe, that same voice held the key to escaping this nightmare. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. No signal, of course, but I pressed the power button anyway. I needed to hear something, anything that could help us. The phone flickered to life, the screen briefly lighting up before turning black again. I slammed it down in frustration, but then something strange happened. The static began. It was soft at first, just a faint hum. But then it grew louder, crackling with energy. A voice came through. Leave. Leave now. I grabbed Olivia's arm, pulling her toward the back of the cabin. There was no time to waste. The figures were closing in on us, and the room felt like it was closing in too. The door. We had to get out. We had to find the door. I rushed to the back of the cabin, my heart racing. Olivia followed close behind, her breath shallow with fear. But when we reached the back wall, I froze. There was no door, no window, no way out. The cabin had trapped us again. We were no longer alone. The figures were everywhere now, surrounding us, closing in. I looked at Olivia, and in her eyes, I saw the same realization, the same sinking terror. This was it. Then, the voice came again, louder this time. Run. I didn't question it. I didn't care if it was a trick. I grabbed Olivia's hand and ran for the corner of the room. Without thinking, I slammed into the wall, and it moved. The wall gave way like it was made of paper. A hidden passage, an escape route, revealed itself in the dark. We didn't hesitate. We ran through the narrow passage, our footsteps echoing in the darkness. The walls of the cabin seemed to shift behind us, but we didn't look back. We couldn't. We just ran. But when we emerged into the forest, the nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun. We ran. I didn't know where we were going. The night air was cold, biting, but we couldn't stop, couldn't afford to slow down. Olivia's breath was ragged behind me, but I didn't dare look back. The trees around us seemed to close in, their branches twisting and creaking like they were alive, like they were reaching for us. We had no idea where we were heading, but I knew one thing for sure. If we didn't get out of this forest, we were never going to leave. The passage through the cabin had led us to a small trail, one barely visible in the darkness. But even as I pushed forward, I could feel it. Something was behind us, just out of sight. The air was thick, the atmosphere heavy with dread, as though the very forest was trying to swallow us whole. Jake, Olivia gasped. Where are we going? What's happening? I don't know, I answered, my voice strained, my legs burning. But we have to keep moving. We stumbled through the trees, branches scratching at our faces, feet tripping over roots and rocks. The deeper we went into the woods, the louder the whispers grew. It was like they were all around us now, pulling us in, tempting us to stop, to look back. But I couldn't. We couldn't afford to. I heard it again, that same voice from the radio. The one that had warned us. Get off the road. You're still here, aren't you? A chill ran through my spine. That voice, it wasn't just a warning anymore. It was mocking us. We were still in their world. Suddenly, Olivia screamed. I turned to find her standing still, staring at something in front of her, her face frozen in terror. I followed her gaze, and that's when I saw it. The figures. They were standing at the edge of the forest, watching us. The man, the woman, the twisted shapes from the cabin. They were all there, just standing in the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. I could hear their whispers now, clear and sharp in the cold night air. "You can't run from us. You belong to us now." I grabbed Olivia's arm, pulling her away from them. "Keep moving. We're almost out. Keep running." We pushed forward, but the forest seemed to change around us. The trees grew denser, the shadows deeper. It was as though the very land was shifting, reshaping itself to trap us. Every step I took felt heavier, like the earth itself was pulling us back toward that cursed cabin. I was exhausted, my body aching, but I couldn't stop, couldn't look back. I could feel them getting closer. I could hear the footsteps behind us, slow at first, but growing faster, like they were closing in on us. And then the worst sound of all, a sharp, high-pitched screech, like nails on a chalkboard, cutting through the air. We burst through the trees, and for a moment, I thought I saw a light in the distance. A sign of hope? Or was it just another trick? We kept running, pushing through the dense underbrush. And then, suddenly, the forest opened up. We broke through the trees and found ourselves on the edge of a road. A real road. Asphalt, streetlights, the distant hum of cars. We were back. The figures didn't follow. They stopped at the edge of the trees, watching us, their eyes glowing in the shadows. But they didn't step into the light. They didn't dare. We were out. We were free. Olivia collapsed onto the side of the road, gasping for breath, her body trembling. I stood there, staring into the woods, my heart racing, but I knew we had escaped. For now, the air was still cold, but I could finally breathe. I turned to look at Olivia, and for the first time since we had gotten to that cursed town, I felt a strange sense of relief. "We're safe," I said, my voice hoarse. But as I looked back at the forest one last time, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A figure standing in the distance, just barely visible in the trees, watching us. It was too far to make out any details, but I knew what it was. It was him, the man, the woman, the creatures. They were still there. They were still watching. I turned to Olivia, who had already started to pull herself together, trying to process what had happened. "Let's go," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "Let's just get the hell out of here." We didn't talk much after that. There was nothing left to say. We got in the first car that passed by, flagged it down, and without a second thought, we left that place behind. But as I sit here now, in the safety of my apartment, I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there, watching. The forest isn't just a forest. The cabin isn't just a cabin. And the road is not just a road. It's a doorway. And I know no matter how far I run, they'll be waiting,